Hello, everyone. I'm Ted Oakley, managing partner at Oxbow, and I have the pleasure today to interview someone that I've watched over the years and always wanted to interview Mike Taylor. He's with us today. He's a managing director of Critical Mass Partners, but we know him better as the manager of the Pink Fund, for all of you that don't know, a great healthcare exchange traded fund that you might want to take a look at. And he's been all the way around. He's done a lot of things, Mike. We're glad to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
You know, not many people have gone from scientists to hedge funds. You were, at Millennium and Citadel, different places. Then you have your own hedge fund. You've done a lot of different things, but you've taken that from scientists to stock picking, and very few people, I doubt, have ever done that.
It's actually a very challenging road to make that transition. And I suppose naivete is what kept me in the game. Had I known the odds of success were probably, I don't know, 1 in 50, I would have done something else.
Well,
But I'm glad I took the road less traveled.
I'm going to start out by asking you a question, and I heard you talk about this a little bit before, but where do you think the end game, or if there is an end game, on our government debt situation?
Wow, that's a big opening question. Um, so, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But we function in a world of the fractional reserve banking system. And that is essentially where every dollar or yen or what have you is borrowed into existence. And when it is borrowed into existence, there is an interest rate, or what we nerds in finance call a hurdle rate, that is attached. And it is very, very difficult, and I would even articulate impossible to achieve that hurdle rate of whether it be 3, 4, 5% when the demographics are like they are now, collapsing demographics. I'll give you an example, and this gets to your point of where we go. If you open up a sushi restaurant in Tokyo and you got 100 tables and you borrowed 2 million bucks or whatever amount of money to open this thing, and you're full on your first day in Tokyo, I promise you, by the end of your career, 30 years from now, you will only fill 70% of your tables because you're going to be missing 30% of the population by that time. And so on average, the utilization is going to go down, 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 but that debt is going to stay there. And that is the real problem that we are running into right now in the industrialized world, is a collapsing population. The fractional reserve currency does not comply with these demographics. And I wasn't sure when we would start to see the impact. And this is a debate that Ed Hyman at ISI and myself have had forever, for 20 years. And I think that time has happened. And it's happened very slowly, then very quickly. And the very quickly part is the governments are overspending a massive piece of GDP in order to continue to have growth, year on year growth. And that growth year on year, 3% or whatever it is trying to offset your hurdle rate. And it's really for political purposes, so they keep getting reelected. And the governments will continue to borrow money and spending until they can't. And then, in the name of saving the dollar, we need to print the dollar. And that's what will happen, in my view. We are going to have serial printing by industrialized nations from here to the rest until pitchforks and torches on the lawn of the Federal Reserve. And that's when it ends. But that's what I believe is the next leg, and there'll be unbelievable trades in there, and there will be fortunes made. But there will also be meaningful social strife and persistent inflation brought about by that.
Not a good look for the bond market for that period.
Oh, you mean forever?
Forever. Yeah, that's what I
So
mean.
no, it's actually terrible for sovereign bonds. And I mean, Japan is a bit more advanced than where we are, and Europe is a bit more advanced too. Southern Europe, specifically Korea, China, and Japan has said for the past 20 years, if only we had a little bit of inflation, everything would be okay. but you seem to be a student of the numbers, and I am a student of the numbers. And the numbers say when you break it apart, that's the last thing Japan would ever want is inflation. Because if they ever had inflation, they would find they also can't stop printing money. And here we are with inflation in Japan, and they can't stop printing money. So they're talking about, oh, we're going to raise interest rates, keep printing money, and pray for inflation to go away. It's going to be very difficult. And the actual production is the one thing I'm trying to figure out, because there's, I believe that we'll see aggregate demand decline, but the number of people actually making products to supply that demand is also in material decline. And so that means that the productive people have to have massive productivity increases in order to offset inflation. So these are things that keep me up at night. And this one I'm working on now, but I believe it is now that these events that I thought might be a little bit in the future, 3, 4, 5, 7 years away, I actually think it must be happening now, because I'm watching runaway spending. And you just saw that in the deficit number that just came out last month. The actual spend on Trump's government and that deficit has actually increased every month this year. And we're on a run rate right now for over $3 trillion deficit this year.
Well, I want to get to another question, but I want to give you a plus on your what you said about this back in March. You mentioned that when we talk about the tariffs and how if everybody was getting murdered, and you said something along the lines is, what I think will happen will be sort of a 60-day cooling off period. Well, that's actually what happened, Mike. It was actually more than 60 days even. And, he started real tough and then he backed them way down. And you were right about that. But what do you think about it now?
We haven't seen the price increases come through. We're going to just start seeing it now. And it's going to be a combination of worse margins and price increases, probably a combination of both, where the companies take a hit on that and they try to pass on the costs that they can. But many look at this in a linear fashion, that if you're importing a widget from somewhere and that widget costs you more because of this tariff, you're just going to increase the price on that widget. Well, that's not how companies work. They actually have a zillion widgets that they have, and some are made here, some are made there. All of them go into a machine and you buy it. So they're actually very likely going to not put on that 15% price increase on that singular product, but they'll try to increase all of their products by 5% to offset that one thing. And so I think we're going to see prices higher. And now, is that inflation? Well, yes, it is, according to this Fed. But recall, if Trump simply devised this as a VAT tax, because that's essentially what it is a value, it's a tax on the consumer. And if he just said, okay, everyone's going to have a 5% VAT tax, well, the Fed wouldn't have calculated that as inflation. So we really don't have inflation. The government's just taking the money. What you are going to very likely have over the next 5 months, in my view, right into before everyone gets their tax checks, people are going to get about $1,000 plus in rebates from the government beginning next year. You're probably going to have a hole in consumption, and it's going to bend the consumption curve. And I think we're already seeing it, by the way, in casual dining.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you along that line, and I think you're really good at this, but a lot of people aren't, and that's probably because when you have a tougher background, you tend to know a little bit about Main Street, about the real world. But what do you think is the difference today between what's happening on Main Street and what Wall Street is thinking?
Wow, that's a great question. I spend as much time as I possibly can talking to people outside of our investment bubble. And this is new for me because I wasn't really allowed to talk to anyone or do these sort of shows until 4 years ago when I left the hedge fund sphere. And so I spend as much time as I can interacting with millennials and Gen Z so I can understand what their thoughts, needs, wants, aspirations are. And I know it sounds silly, but it really requires a full-time sort of dialogue with younger people to understand because their wants, needs are very different than us, very different than us. The vast majority of young people coming into the world in their early 20s have a lot of college debt and they own no assets. And it is really about getting a job, paying off debt, and someday moving out of my parents' house. And that's their aspiration, which was very different than now. I left school with a lot of student loan debt, but I was an anomaly. I was in school for an awful long time between science and business, and I was able to pay it off at a pretty early, very early time. But most of these people won't, and so their wants, needs, desires, and what they have to do is very different than what we had to do, and so it means that their list is very, very different. And this is why we're seeing a generation that is valuing experiences over material objects. And it's really because experiences are less expensive than a material object.
Yeah, and I don't know what you think about this, but that group of people, they seem to want to try to catch up by doing some highly speculative stuff, that we wouldn't have done that highly speculative. I don't know how you feel about that, but it seems,
I I do, and that's the YOLO generation, and this is that generation. It's millennials and the Gen Z, but there's a reason for it. The reason is um, they are given an options account at Robinhood. If you look back 20 years ago, you had to be someone of significance to have an options account. They wouldn't let you lever up like that. And here they can open up $1,000 and bet 100x that notionally in options. And so the options market now, I was just talking to a friend of mine at, and I won't say who because he'll get tons of trouble, but Jane Street. And Jane Street was telling me how they make all their money in these options markets because the options markets are traded more than equities, and it's retail, and it is the Gen Z and the millennial generation who is betting wildly, and it really accounts for a lot of the wild movements, and it sets us up for a huge disaster if the government actually lets us have a dip in growth. And to date, for the past 15 years, they have not allowed a dip.
yeah, you don't think they'll ever allow another? I mean, I shouldn't ask that question that way. Do you
You
think?
can.
Yeah, well, how do you think they'd never allow another market break like 2008 because of that?
No,
Yeah,
they won't. Or they'll do everything they can to prevent it because um, the financial markets, if you take a look at the stores of value, this sort of stock market, this equity market, which is speculative, this is a huge source of leverage and growth for the world. As long as the asset gets bigger, you can borrow against it. The value of the collateral goes up, you can borrow against it. And this is part of the game. In the event, when you take a look at the ins and outs of the math, and we go back to what is the math behind it, in the event that we did have a material slowdown and tax revenues went down because of it, our government, we're already spending over 50% of more than the tax revenue that we bring in. So we bring in about $5 trillion in tax revenue, but we're spending over $7.5 trillion, or on a run rate for that this year. In the event that we actually had a recession, and that tax revenue historically would drop by about 40%. So we'd be bringing in about $3 trillion in revenue and actually have to expand spending in order to offset a downturn. So we're talking about $3 trillion in tax revenue and $8 trillion in debt in order to try to keep things afloat. So it is, in my mind, for that reason, why they are panicked to respond to every dark cloud in the sky they will ever see, to a ferocious, violent degree. That's where I
So
think we are.
let me ask you on that leverage piece, how do you see the leverage in private credit and private equity?
So we have massive leverage in private credit and private equity. And that is one of the big dangerous bubbles that we are looking at. But at the same time, in personal housing, we've actually seen quite a bit of a drop in the let's say the mortgage versus income. What people are paying on their current mortgages versus income is actually incredibly reasonable at this point. And that has to do with their wages went up, but their mortgage is at 3% because a lot of people got that 3% mortgage. Now, that's great for existing, terrible if you're young and you're trying to get a new house. You can't afford it because that mortgage payment is actually much better correlated to your actual income. So for existing owners, it's actually a huge benefit. So that's a place where I see positivity in the sort of like setup, but it is very negative when you look at how big private banking and private equity and private credit has become in the system. And like other times, when it blows up, you find out how bad it really is. And it's only when we do because it's not regulated. You do not know how big it is. And you and maybe if you have clients and you've seen this too, I've talked to many clients who have what is it, a 40-30-30 approach. And the 40, and this is new. I said, what's a 40-30-30 approach? He goes, well, I have a third in treasuries. I got about a third in stocks and about 40% in private credit because it's yielding 7-8%. And all my clients are thrilled. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah,
And
that
that's
wouldn't be for us, I can tell you.
well, that's what I see many times, and it looks really safe.
Well, it's drifting on in though too, because now, you want to bring all this private credit and private equity into the 401ks and all that sort of thing. And
Hmm.
these people, they don't know what they're dealing with when they're buying into that. Everybody knows that, but
Well, honestly, if you bring it in, you now have a new pool of buyers, and it'll be a bonanza, and it will last for a period of time until it all blows up, gets over their skis, but yeah, I mean, it would be an absolute Wall Street bonanza for quite some time. But the aftermath will be just like other aftermaths. But this one, that sort of aftermath would be far worse than a housing crisis. Because in the housing crisis we saw in '08, we had incredible collateral, meaning a house. And the worst you're going to lose on that house is 30% at worst. But for the private credit, it's usually the collateral is a business. And frequently that business can be worth zero. And that's the problem. You don't have real collateral. So I watch that, but I'm also cognizant. It's not the end of the world if they do these sort of things. There's incredible trades to be had on that.
I'll ask you this because we've talked about this a lot around here, but if you look at the period since 2009, call it that 16-year period, you have a lot of young portfolio managers, a lot of investors, and that's all they know. And so I'm curious of what you think about that group, and will they be able to see any clouds on the horizon if anything bad happens?
No. But that's what makes a great bubble, right? That's what makes a great bubble is that you have an entire generation of investors that don't know down. And that's okay. I mean, this is history. It repeats itself. I just can't believe that I'm getting old enough to actually see history repeat itself. And so
Join the crowd.
they won't see it. They won't see it. But that's okay. That's okay. They're not supposed to see it. And look, anyone who sees it early and bets that way loses their job,
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting because back in the period between 95 and 2000, I watched a lot of first-time young portfolio managers, and they bought in hook, line, and sinker. and they got blown up completely between 2000 and '03, and had to really go back and revamp the thought processes and say, what's this all about? And I think you could conceivably have something like that again. I don't know if you feel that way, but
Oh, no, there will be, and that'll be a micro blow up, believe it or not. Micro, because the real macro blow up that you were talking about that will happen in the future is going to be the private credit, private equity. That will be it because it is totally unregulated. Nobody knows what's in it, and your collateral stinks. But so far as what you're probably referring to is like when this AI thing slows down, because that's the real parallel you're drawing to in 2000. And 2000 was fiber. We couldn't have enough fiber laid
right,
out all over the world.
way
JDS
overbuilt
Unify,
it.
global crossings. Well, they didn't know they overbuilt it. They didn't. And the reason is Cisco. They didn't know they overbuilt it because if they thought that the use of fiber was linear until Cisco made these damn switches that all of a sudden could carry more bandwidth on fiber. Well, holy crap, now we can jam all that information in the tunnel. Now we don't need as much fiber. What do we do now? And so they had a giant CapEx build out and they realized they could do more with less. And DeepSeek, we saw a glimmer of that where you can do more with less with AI. Right now, it is the feverish build out to connect computers to make supercomputers to do the processing for neat. And it is incredibly powerful what is happening. And I don't want to besmirch that. It's truly epic. And I'm doing an awful lot of work right now and figuring out who's the winners and losers, as I'm sure all your investors are doing the exact same thing right now. And they have their list, winners and losers, and they're material. But what will happen at some point in the near future, and it might be when Meta might be the start. Meta has to, if they're going to keep spending $40 billion a year on CapEx, they have to borrow money next year in order to do it because they burn through their cash pile. Do they want to do that? Because remember, that money now has a 7% hurdle rate attached to it. So they got to borrow money in order to build this capacity. What if they come out and they say, you know what, we're going to spend a little bit less next year? Well, now the comp's negative. That might be the beginning of the end of the build out. And that will have a profound impact on valuations. And that with also companies getting better at using that teraflops of bandwidth and getting the AI product that they want out of less. Because right now, every inquiry that you have is served by a Ferrari. You want to go one block? Well, I got a Ferrari for you and it does 300 miles an hour. Let's go. Well, you don't need a Ferrari for doing some of these queries. You might need a Hyundai. But right now, they haven't figured out how to use a Hyundai. But they will. And that will be the moment when we have a bend in the CapEx and we will have a micro blip, as I called it earlier. Markets will have a massive correction in a certain space. It will not be the end of the world, but it will be a material correction. And healthcare will probably do much, much, much better when that happens.
Well, yeah, because it would be contra, but it would.
There it
I
is.
would assume that and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I assume that at different times in your hedge fund management, you were 50, 75% liquid. If you thought something was going to go awry, maybe not. Maybe you went the
Oh,
other way.
no, I'd be short.
You're short though, but
Oh, yeah.
you're not long in the market. Is my point.
Yeah, no, I would be net short materially, and I have in the past greatly been very short, past my limits, if you will. But Millennium was very kind to me, and they ended up letting me run money in a way that many couldn't. So I thank them for that.
Yeah. So my question to you is this, because for individual investors. Well, first of all, let me say this for individuals, family offices, endowments, that sort of things, before I leave private equity, they've all bought into that program. So I see these big foundations and funds of some we manage for, they're 35% private equity or
Yeah.
alternatives, and I'm not certain they even know what they have.
They don't.
and they certainly don't know how to get out of it.
Well, they know they can't.
Yeah. And so, and then individuals, what we're saying, I'm curious what you think about this. They don't have the expertise you're going to have, obviously. So, but I mean, even large individual portfolios, they've really become so complacent that they don't really even think about anything anymore. It's just an automatic, we're going to do this because this has always worked. And they've almost forgotten about anything that could go wrong with anything at all. History
Hmm.
tells you that's not the way it is.
Well, history will tell you that, but in the past, the government knew that if we had an economic cycle, we would come out the other end. But at this point, given their debt loads, they don't know. And that's why they respond so feverishly to any black cloud in the sky. And I am struck by it. I'm in awe by it, but I'm very respectful of it. And you watch, you say, wow, we're going to come with $3 trillion new paper to the table. US, I'm saying. And many countries are like this. I'm just citing the US because I know that one well, and it probably subscribes to most of your investors. Um, so we have $3 trillion or so of new paper that has to come to market. Normally, about 42% of that is bought OUS outside the US. But the problem is that you can count the tariffs. Those international buyers of US Treasuries right now moving forward are going to have about $800 billion fewer in their pockets in order to buy that 3 trillion. By the way, that 3 trillion is up from 2 trillion last year, and it's $3 trillion of new money, and we're taking 800 billion out of their pockets. So how do we play this out? How does that happen? Who is the buyer moving forward of that paper? Well, our Treasury Secretary said, okay, I need to find a new buyer. And so what he did was he changed the rules for the banks and allowed for them exactly right around $3 trillion of new leverage for them on the short end of the yield curve. Problem's fixed. We now have the buyer. Got it? That's what happened in the past 3 months. All of that just happened in the past 3 months, and almost nobody knows about it. Just change the rules on leverage for the banks so now they can become the buyer. But there's a catch. They'll only be a buyer on the short end of the yield curve, sub 3 year paper. So that's what's going to happen is that we're going to finance all this on the short end so we don't mess with the long end and actually have what you would call, and in our business we would call, price discovery. We will not have we do not want price discovery on the long end. And that's it. And that's where we are now.
So let me ask you a question. If one of your favorite cousins called you or somebody that you could really talk to, because you're not going to do this openly, and said, "Hey, what advice would you have for an average investor today? They're not obviously sophisticated like you, but you have any parting advice for that group of people?"
Your vote counts. That's what my advice is. Your vote counts an awful lot. Money matters and math matters. And I do have a soft spot for for people in their 20s, specifically in their 20s right now. They were sold a very difficult bill of goods that they bought into. They bought into buying an education that maybe they didn't need and maybe wasn't that good. And the price went up, 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 up because the money was free. So of course the price goes up. It was all guaranteed government loans, or mostly guaranteed government loans, and now they still owe it. And it's very difficult for young people to make these sort of very big decisions when you're 18 years old to go to college or University of Phoenix, remote school, and get a PhD in something that costs an awful lot of money that actually isn't going to yield you anything, and sometimes not a good education at all. Is that higher education is not meant for everyone.
Not for everyone. And I know you because you told me this. You were a saver and are a saver. And I think of that art has been lost on a lot of young people. They just don't understand the benefit of saving.
And that's okay. They shouldn't understand it terribly well for a good reason. They've never had a real downdraft situation where they had to learn that. And that's it's a learned event. And I came, like we talked before this call just briefly, and I said the hedge fund guys look at me as the 1972 class because I was born in 72, and I grew up as a young child in a gas crisis, in an inflation crisis, and in a the threat of nuclear winter, where we had to practice at school getting under our desks and practice getting away from windows if there's ever a nuclear explosion because our skin would light on fire. We learned this as kids. This is how my life was. And so we were always cognizant of crises currently or right around the corner. And so the mentality of that persists on. Now, maybe this is the new norm, though, my friend Ted, that there are no downdrafts, and the government will always fix things, and we will never have a dark cloud in the sky. Maybe that's the new, and it is our experience in the past that's the old.
Yeah.
So
I
we
would,
have to be cognizant. Maybe we're just totally wrong,
could
and that
be, could be,
and
but I
that
would take the under on that one.
well, and that the government spending $8 trillion but only collecting $5 trillion in revenue is totally sustainable because they'll just print money and we'll be okay. Um, but that's going to be the mindset. And I'll say this a million times for Pink and everyone. Your job in markets is to make money,
Yeah.
not to be right.
Yeah. And I know that's been your mantra all along. And the last question on that, actually, I was going to ask you because I told you I'd get around to this was, everybody, as every business I talk to, and my businesses, I have different businesses, but different people too, and you too. Uh, you know, healthcare is one of the bigger costs, maybe the biggest for many, many, many companies and individuals and everything. Where, what do you think that's going on now? Will that change any of that at all, or are we just stuck with this for forever?
Well, it depends on one singular question. When do you want to die? And if it's very far away,
Uh,
then I will submit healthcare is going to be expensive.
okay,
But if you're okay with terrible healthcare and living to 74, well, then it could be pretty cheap.
cheap is good. Okay.
And that's and look, I'm joking too.
Yeah.
I'm joking in between. Um, but innovation is what has made our lives so good. I'm on innovative drugs right now to help me with some medical issues that are not available in other countries. And it does cost more, but it's changed my life and I can be productive and run this pink fund. In other countries, my treatment would be a fentanyl patch for the rest of my life. That's it. Very cheap and effective, but I would be addicted to painkillers and eventually I'd lose my hearing. And I'd probably eventually, soon enough, die of cardiac arrest in my 50s. But that's how those people do. So we do have a gift here. Believe it or not, we have a gift in America on innovative medicines and many, many, many more to come. So it is going to be an expensive piece forever. But I will submit that we're in a golden age. And I realize golden ages are very difficult to identify when you're in the middle of it. So I'll just say it right now. We're in the middle of a golden age of discovery and development, where the cost associated with discovering and developing drugs and medical technology devices and diagnostics has plummeted. The time has contracted, and the innovation is vertical. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I started in this business, there were two drugs, a pill and a new thing called an antibody that you could take to treat certain diseases, autoimmune or cancer. And that was it. And in the past 25 years, we have a dozen new vehicles, whether it be antisense technology, whether it be viral-based gene therapy technologies, deltas in between of that, combinations of that, or antibodies that are attached to drugs that will seek out targets and use a bomb to kill cancers, a drug bomb to kill that cancer. All of these things happened over this tiny period of time, 25 years. And the cadence of it is vertical right now in that innovation. And there's going to be a sea of things that keep you living longer and better. And I mean better. And
No, I would tell everybody, Mike, that if they want to be in the middle of that, because I know, I know you're widespread on what you do in the healthcare fund and pink. If you want to be in the middle of that, you probably should look at pink. I mean, over the years, you'd have a great person running the thing for sure. But I want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot of
well,
things going on.
thank you. It's honestly my pleasure. And I would suggest for all of your listeners, when you do look at pink, take a look and compare its performance to every other healthcare fund and the healthcare benchmarks year to date. Inception to date, it's been around for about 3.5 years. I'm not allowed to talk about the performance because then it's a promotional thing. So I ask you to look at the performance and draw your own conclusions as to, is this a good investment for you or not? It is a good investment for me. I happen to be one of the largest shareholders.
And I don't think I don't know that they know this, but you give back all the earnings and any fees. You get no compensation.
Yes, all the net profits, our fees and so forth after our costs, goes to the Susan G. Komen Foundation for Breast Cancer.
Yeah. And
And
that's,
as does my compensation.
yeah.
And
And
it
I
is an
want to tell
honor
you,
to do so. And in fact, I was just talking to Paula today, who's the CEO of that wonderful charity. And we're getting together for dinner real soon.
yeah. Well, listen, we had great having you, Mike, and hopefully next year we can have you back again if you don't mind.
I would be delighted.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say, if you like this video and you want to see more of this type of information, because we really try to get the information that you don't see from anybody else, then be sure and click on subscribe and you'll see more of what we do here at Oxbow.